do that like exactly the way you wrote it this time. I'll try it that way too.
Got to know the rules before you break the rules.
I started just talking, and then I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna just ad lib this part." Okay.
I'm so glad.
I'm workshopping this bullshit.
I'm so glad you're not a commercial airline pilot.
Or 911 operator.
Yeah.
What seems to be your trouble? I've been stabbed. Really? Or okay.
You want to know trouble? Have you ever met my mother?
You want to know trouble? Well, you ever been to Golden Corral when the chocolate Wonderfall is out?
That's trouble, my friend.
That's trouble.
Maybe that's where you're calling from. And if you aren't, maybe we can meet for lunch.
Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
A place where pop culture creatives
discover design icons that make us tick.
And we share a few cocktails in the process.
Yep.
Today we're going to be hitting rewind as we jump in and review the first half of our second season.
And nothing goes better with a mixtape than a mixed drink.
So grab one of your favorites, invite over a drinking and listening buddy, and see if we mention some of your favorite moments when you join us here back in the bar. So Todd, here we are.
Yep.
We're back in the bar. I think it's nice that we have our listeners here with us. They've stuck with us this far. It's been 2 seasons. I think we ought to be proud of that. I'm going to pat us on the back, pat ourselves. I guess we could pat one another on the back. I don't exactly know.
Or you could buy me a drink to celebrate. Wouldn't that be good?
Is this really that special of an occasion?
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I tell you what. Let's leave that up to the listeners. Let's revisit some of our favorite moments from the first part of season 2.
Hey, you know what? Speaking of bad ideas like me buying you a drink, if you recall our episode 15, we talked about a couple of magnificent flops.
What an interesting way to have the beginning of a podcast that talks about pop culture to start talking about flops. And, you know, I think we hit on a couple really good ones. I was really interested in the origins of OK Soda that you were talking about.
Yes.
I had no idea of what's the right word that I'm looking for to describe the origins of OK Soda? Complicated, superfluous. I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
Yeah, Here's a word I'll use, I suppose. It's sort of zeitgeisty, Dada approach to beverage creation. How about that?
That's a really good one. Yeah, I'd say it's extreme obsession about trying to get to the zeitgeist of the Dada.
Yeah, it's almost like trying really, really hard to look like you're not trying at all.
How about we take a listen to a clip and let the listener decide?
Sounds good. So if you're Coca-Cola and you're still sort of licking your wounds from the failed product launch of New Coke, you've boomeranged back to the original Coke formula, and the guy who launched New Coke comes to you with another product idea. What would you do?
Kick his ass out of my office.
Well, Coke did exactly the opposite. They welcomed Sergio Zyman with open arms.
Nice.
And so he came in and he had this idea, this beverage idea for a new cola product marketed basically at Gen X slackers.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the deal. This was what he figured out, right? So he was working with Wieden and Kennedy, the famous ad shop out of Portland.
Right.
And they were hired to basically market this soda. So they're looking at trying to figure out what to name it. Mm-hmm. And they started to do some research. And they determined that the most second well-known English language phrase in the whole world is the word Coke because of Coca-Cola. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And cocaine.
What are the 2 letters in the middle of the word Coke?
Okay. Oak. Yeah. Yes. Oh, I never, you know what? It's interesting. I never put that together. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
well.
Okay. I know, really. And that can surprise nobody.
And here we are, folks.
I love all of the attention paid to starting OK Soda. I guess on the spreadsheet it was a perfect fit. But you know, really, when you look at all of those fantastic artists that you told us about that created artwork and illustrations for those cans, it was pretty magnificent.
Oh yeah, it was incredible the way they were able to round up this this roster, just this all-star roster of underground comic artists, and again, sort of a touchstone for Gen X, right? And really trying to make something that, of course, was very, very corporate, very sort of anti-corporate, and kind of sticking it to the man, I guess, while
being the man.
Yeah, while the man himself is making some money. But you know, there was still some great inside jokes that I think the artists were able to pass through, and this is one of those moments. As I mentioned earlier, Wieden & Kennedy, this ad agency, calls these underground illustrators, you know, because they need to have this street cred, this slacker street cred. Who better to do that than this handful of, these illustrators? And so Daniel Close, you know, you probably know him, 8-Ball Comics, the movie Ghost World, which is one of my favorite movies. Maybe we'll talk about that again at some point. He was asked later, like, why he decided to do this. And he basically... You know, because the whole idea of this, of course, is it's Coke, it's the man, it's corporate America. You're this underground artist, and you're selling out to this corporate client, right? So when Close was asked, why did you do this? He's like, it paid well, far more than I was making with my comics. I think he said it was paid more than the last, 4 comics projects he had done combined.
Wow.
And... also, he loved the idea of being subversive and doing something for Coke where some of it could be, some of the subversion could sort of be hidden in plain sight, and he could stick it to the man. So, for example, the character that he drew, he made sure that it had a face with the eyes and the nose of the vacant stare of Charles Manson, which I think is amazing.
I love that story, Elliot. Speaking of dead stares, the magnificent flop that I was talking about was a more recent one, Google Glass. And, you know, it was, I think I used the phrase, it was a tactic in search of a strategy. And I hit on a couple parts that started to show the, pardon the pun, the cracks in the glass, if you will. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah. Yep. That was when I believe in my... plumbing the depths of Todd, my infinite pop culture knowledge, I was able to correctly guess the term glass hole.
That's right. And Google Glass became banned in certain things, and our privacy laws had not caught up with our technology. So let's hear a clip about that. So at that point, the cracks started to show in sort of the product itself. Now, obviously, it was an interesting idea, and it had a lot of possibilities. It definitely had a lot of what-if factor to it. But unfortunately, they discontinued the beta just 6 months after the open beta was available, due to privacy concerns and reported bugs and low battery life and being banned in public spaces.
Yeah, I think people were kind of using them, or could use them, for very sneaky things, right?
Yeah, well, it made making porn a lot easier, you know? Because, yeah, I mean, you could just follow people around.
Yeah, like weren't they scared of people using them in dressing rooms and retail
stores?
Oh
yeah, and restrooms.
Like that?
Yeah, they were outlawed in bars. And so here's...
Hey, kind of like us. Yeah, Todd, so this was really interesting. As you mentioned, the legal landscape had really not caught up with the technological landscape, which, that's pretty typical. I think this was also a situation where, as you mentioned, the device was ahead of its time in some ways. It was really a solution looking for a problem in some ways. It was, it was just kind of all over the place. But of course, it's persisted, unlike OK Soda, Google Glass, and some of the other things that it launched, right? Some of this, like, more broad thinking, it's still around now. So I think that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I think, and we'll hear in this clip, but I think there will be more possibilities for Google Glass in the future for certain professions, but I don't see OK Soda returning. Do you, Elliot?
You never know. We should check Kickstarter.
All right. Well, there you go. Let's listen to this clip about Google Glass. It was, as I said a little while ago, Google was both behind the times and ahead of the times, but it'll be back. The company did a release.
This is where we should have the Jaws theme music start.
Okay. I like that. Or Terminator.
I'll be back.
It'll be back. Yeah. I like that. The company did a release in May of 2019 that said the second version of its Enterprise Edition model is in the works and would be out. And the pair of glasses are advertised as a risk-free means of increasing productivity in the workspace. So the way that they are approaching it now is not for, the common guy who's wearing Google Glass, the common glasshole wearing Google Glass out to a bar and trying to look hip and cool while also looking pervy. But it gives you a screen that allows employees to multitask without turning on to a phone or another program or another computer. And it also now has, as you started in the beginning, it has augmented reality and virtual reality capabilities, as well as improved processors and cameras. And they have partnered with eyeglass designers to make them a little bit more fashion forward. Now, that remains to be seen because, again, they sort of jumped in the fashion world early, but realizing that Google Glass was not a fashion statement. But nonetheless, they have gone back and really redesigned it from a lot of different aspects. But I can imagine that this, while probably not commercially available anytime really soon for you and for me, but I think it would gain a lot of popularity and serve a great need to folks like surgeons or engineers or people that fix highly detailed machines, people that help design circuit boards, things like that. Things where, as part of your job, you have to take in and you have to understand lots of information at a time without being distracted.
As you're talking about this, two things pop into my head. I'm going to go back, and I think Terminator is the right music choice because it sort of sounds like that's what the display is going to be. Or it's sort of like Neo in The Matrix, where you need to, in a pinch, learn how to fly a helicopter.
Yeah. Good one.
Okay, Todd, so Google Glass. This was, in spite of the fact that it really blew up in a lot of the same faces that were wearing Google Glass, you could sort of say it was a status symbol of sorts, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so that leads me to think about another form of status symbol, albeit earlier, like 20, 30 years earlier, which was the business card, right?
Oh, like in our episode 16, where we talked about designed mad props for movies, huh?
Yes, and we both love the 80s, and the movie that I brought up was American Psycho. Firmly,
yes.
The book was written in the 80s, the movie set in the 80s, and there's a pretty seminal scene that has a business card at the center of it. And I can't think of any other movie that really has a prop, like just a printed, there's maps and things like that, like you think about the Goonies and stuff, but just something where it's something so benign, I guess. It's like sort of a
That
MacGuffin.
became an obsession.
Yeah, with this guy. Well, with this whole group of people, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I want to jump into a clip where we talk about the introduction of this prop, of the business card. So let's give it a listen.
Oh, right.
So when I was thinking of a movie scene that has a designed object at the center of it, I was rolling through a lot of different thoughts here. But one that has come up over the years with several design friends I have is the business card scene in American Psycho, the Christian Bale movie. Do you know this scene?
Yeah. That's really one of the few scenes of that movie that I really remember.
Yeah, I think a lot of people remember it. I mean, it's really funny, actually. I say design friends, but there are some non-design friends I know that that's sort of their introduction to design. And so maybe that says a lot about us and you and I in the profession we've chosen.
Yeah, because it was so... What I remember about that is, business cards are important to you and me and other designers, but I've never seen it as a central part of a movie like that actually caused bad things to happen. Yeah, like you said, it was a seminal scene about something really kind of unimportant in the world, but so important to those people. And you brought up something. I admit, I've seen the movie a couple times. I love the scene, very familiar with the business card scene. But you brought up some of the interesting inconsistencies in their business cards and even, some, how we say, typographical challenges, which adds this level of hilarity to a group of people so obsessed with them, right?
Yeah, and really, so the business that all these people were in is mergers and acquisitions. So a lot of numbers, a lot of details, very ego-driven also. That's why everybody was obsessing over these business cards. But all of these people are also off in a way. And so whether it was intended or not, there's some really interesting things happening with each of the business cards being used as props in this movie. Let's give this clip a listen too. But this is one thing that's even I don't even know if this is on purpose or by accident. So, as I mentioned earlier, these guys work for Pierce & Pierce, and it's a mergers and acquisitions firm. So there's like a word mark that's their logo, or it's like derivations of this one quote unquote logo, because again, everyone interprets it differently on their cards. But acquisitions is actually misspelled on every one of these cards.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it misses the C, like it's spelled AQUISI. So it's hilarious that out of all these jokers, no one can even correctly spell the profession that they're in.
So all of them are damaged in some way. Each of their personalities has a damaged bit.
Yeah, and it's really great. Bateman's card, like if you actually go back and look at this, so this is Christian Bale's card that he's so proud of.
Right.
There's also another typo. So there's actually a space missing between the company is Pierce ampersand Pierce, and on his card there's a space missing between the ampersand and the second Pierce. So not only is there a misspelling in the business name, but then they didn't even get the spacing right. It's really great. So the thinking is there's like a great theory online about this, that the card is actually brilliant in that it presents on its surface as being very clean and very upstanding, kind of like the character. But the longer, and it's also like the trim on it is off, so like the margins, like everything is quote unquote off center. So the more you look at this card, the more you're like, man, this stuff just really doesn't add up.
Something's not right.
Yeah, like there's all these little details that start to manifest themselves. So again, that's a nod to this guy presents himself very well at first, but the more you live with him, the more you're like, there's like a lot of little weird things that are happening
so
here.
It was like it's about the flash of the first impression, but when it gets to the substance of quality or something like that, it's just not there. Yeah, Elliot, you brought up just an interesting point a minute ago about the business cards representing these broken, kind of dysfunctional people coming together. And the movie prop that I was talking about was the giant W in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And what I love about this is there's this random group of people that come together because of an accident, and it introduces this idea from this movie that was from 1963, introduces this idea of this ensemble cast and just sort of all these characters that people knew so well were popping up in unusual places.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it just, the search for the giant W sets all of these weird characters off in their unusual directions. You used the term madcap comedy earlier. It is the maddest of caps.
It is truly like a
it's
live-action Mad Magazine. Oh, yeah, there is so much going on. It's amazing.
It is exhausting. But the thing, so a little bit about the movie for people who haven't seen it. And again, came out in 1963, and it is essentially a road race. But it's what happens, and I'm not giving anything away because this happens in the first 2 minutes of the movie. A car goes over a cliff in mountainous region of Southern California, and people who were driving along that this car had passed, they witnessed this. They all stopped to pull over to see what happened to the guy. So they go down into the valley where the car went over, and the guy is laying there. He's still alive, but just barely. And this is where you know that it's going to be madcap, because he tells them that he wants them to search for this money that is rightfully his. And it's $350,000, and that today would have been $2.8 million. So, a decent chunk of change. And he keeps saying that it's supposedly it's buried under a big W. Now, the guy who is dying, who had essentially stolen this money and hidden it and then gone to prison, and now he's out of prison and then crashes, is Jimmy Durante, the famous entertainer. And it just sets up that there will be cameos by everybody in this movie. So think about these 5 very different types of people, these eccentric characters that just meet out of nowhere on a road and are all told at the same time that they should find a way to get this money and split it, essentially. Long story short, they argue and they can't.
We're listening to or watching, really, these people run around. They're talking about the words that were on the dead man's lips, of course, which are kind of a riddle, and he says, look for the big W. Did we ever figure out what the W stood for in this movie? Like, what does it actually mean?
Yeah, no, it's never referenced at all, which, we could probably make up some interesting theories of that.
Yeah.
Winning or something like that.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen planted the palm trees?
Yeah, maybe Charlie Sheen was the only one not in the movie, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But, interesting, this is sort of a behind the scenes. You know how I love sort of the behind the scenes of stuff?
Yeah.
They told, I'm not going to give away the whole story because we've got an interesting clip that talks about the number of stunt people used and how how they kept the script a secret. They gave they gave us a reading script and a stunt script. So let's take a listen to that. And interestingly enough, this movie is so cram full of action that each actor was given 2 scripts, one for the dialogue and one for the action. And I found this interesting tidbit that, as you know, if you've seen it recently, like I just did, it's so true. At the time this movie was made, which I think it was made in late 1962, because it came out in 63, there were only about 100 stunt performers in the country. 80 of them worked on this film. So 80% of all stunt performers were in this movie at the same time.
Hey, Todd, so we're talking about stunts. So speaking of stunts, I think one thing we can agree on is that there's probably no bigger publicity stunt for a city than when they announce they are hosting a future Olympic Games. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's got to be a big deal for a city to win the games like this.
Yeah. Let's hear a quick clip about one of the cities that a lot of listeners might not be aware was in the running for the Winter Olympic Games, and it's a city here in the United States. There were a number of U.S. cities as well. So one of them was Lake Placid, New York. So we know how that ended for Lake Placid, of course. They got the Olympics 4 years later, the Winter Olympics.
Right.
Salt Lake City, Utah, that may sound familiar. We also know how it ended for them. You know, they got the Olympics a number of years later. Seattle, Washington, to the best of my knowledge, they've never hosted Olympics.
They got coffee.
They got Starbucks, so that was a good consolation prize.
Yeah, and grunge.
Okay, but the city I want to talk to you about today is none other than the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado. Does that ring a bell with the Olympics? Does that, when you think Olympics and when you think host cities in the United States, does Denver, is that one of the cities that pops into your head?
No, I'm sorry it doesn't, but that I may just not know that much about it. But no, I don't think I've ever heard of Denver hosting the Olympics.
There's a reason for that.
Okay, so that was 1976.
Yep.
I mean, I was around. I know you were very young, but for the life of me, I don't remember the Olympics being held in Colorado, Elliot. So what did I miss something here?
Well, sort of. I would say there are a lot of people in this story who missed something. I would say the people of Denver and the people leading the state of Colorado missed one big thing, and that was talking to the voters, talking to the people to see what they thought about hosting a game. So let's give that a listen real quick to hear how that turned out.
So it sounds like the rest of the world and the selection committee were really high on Denver, but not other people? Not.
It turns out the residents of Colorado did not think that this was as good of an idea as the city of Denver and the rest of the world. There was kind of this donut around Denver that really wasn't down with this happening, basically. So the hitch was that Colorado voters had to ultimately pass any legislation to fund the games.
Oh, wow.
No big deal, right? You know,
right.
I'm sure Denver's like, hey, look.
Who wouldn't want that?
State pride, national pride. Who wouldn't want this? Yeah, turns out the voters of Colorado didn't want it. So they voted it down. They voted the measure down in a 3-2 margin. So in other words, for every 2 people who voted for it, 3 people voted against it. They said 60% of voters said thanks, but no thanks. And their objections were largely along the lines of what I mentioned earlier. They objected to the cost. They objected to the updates to the infrastructure. That is kind of the headache I mentioned in Atlanta, right? Like, who wants this stuff? But also, keep in mind, this is Colorado. And so they really place a high value, and rightfully so, on the environment there. And they did not think the environmental impact at the end of the day was going to be worth it. So anyway, Todd, as we found out, it doesn't always work out, right? Even though you not only have a lot of civic pride for yourself and you convince other people that, your town is the spot, at the end of the day, sometimes Austria wins, I think, when it all boils down to it. But let's talk about when the U.S. You remember when the U.S. was winning, Todd? Do you remember that? Again, the 80s?
1984.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 1984.
I mean, we could have a whole podcast series just about 1984. Not the book. I mean, like the year Ghostbusters came.
Yeah. I mean, well, we could do a podcast where we read the book, but that would lose even more listeners. But anyway, interestingly enough, here's a clip that I love that talks about how LA was chosen, and it's just shy of pulling a name out of a hat, I think, if you recall how the cities that were
it was an incredibly scientific process, if I recall.
Why LA in 1984? And for those of you who weren't around in 1984, it's exactly the way you think it would be if you listened to Madonna records and watched the Brat Pack movies. It was very colorful. It was very bright. It was very geometric. Anyway, so L.A. was awarded the bid to be the host city in 1978. So they did it, quite a few years in advance. But get this, Elliot, the bid was only between two cities because at the time, in the 72 Munich Olympics, the murder of the Israeli athletes had really put a black spot on the Olympics. And then you're talking about the Winter Olympics of 76, but the Summer Olympics in Montreal in 76 were a financial disaster.
Yes.
So there were only two cities that wanted to host the Olympics. One was L.A., and the other one was Tehran, Iran. So I don't know if you recall things that were happening around 1978 in Iran.
I recall they weren't good.
They weren't good. That's true. Some shit went down is what happened. So ultimately, the Tehran bid was withdrawn due to growing revolution policy and the Iranian government. So this is when the Shah was ousted, and then later, 1979, hostages were taken. And anyway, so that we're not talking about that yet. So, ta-da, oddly enough, L.A. won the bid, and that's in quotation points.
So, Todd, we talk L.A. L.A. Olympics, I mean, being the age that I am, I vaguely remember the Lake Placid Olympics. Like, I'm just barely old enough to remember those. I was 6 or 7 when those happened. But the L.A. Olympics, I was 11 then. And I vividly remember those. I mean, I remember watching those on TV.
Yeah. Were you wearing your Coca-Cola?
I was wearing my
Coca-Cola
when
gear?
I wasn't wearing my Spuds McKenzie shirts. I was wearing my Ocean
perfect.
Pacific. I was my Jams.
And your Madonna lace.
Yeah, exactly.
bustier.
Yeah, well,
great.
that's me, fashion victim, guilty as charged.
Hey.
Heyo. But what I really remember is, I think, my family was one of those. I would always go over to friends' houses, and they would have like fancy things like color TVs that had push buttons rather than knobs, and they had this magical box called a remote control. And so we were. What was funny was, I remember my family being one of the first families to have cable, but we were one of the last families to actually enjoy that cable in color. I don't know.
They had fancy boxes called remote controls, and the Strunk family had 2 little boys to go up to the TV and
yeah,
change
exactly.
it.
Some in the 1800s, families would have multiple children to perform farm chores. My brother and I, later in life, comparing notes, figured it was just so my dad could watch football on different channels at the same time. But I digress. But when we finally did get a color TV, this was... I just remember how killer these Olympics looked, right? Like, I mean, I felt they were really, really special. Like, it certainly didn't look like any other sporting event or TV show. I mean, that's just the look and feel of it was magical.
It was, and the designer, Deborah Sussman, worked closely with the architects for the games. And I think this was one of the first times when they came together as an entire design system. And the architects gave Deborah Sussman some great advice that I captured in this clip. Let's take a listen. Her inspiration was diverse indigenous cultures that expressed Los Angeles and Southern California. And she combined these with traditional elements that you might find in the U.S., such as stars and stripes, but they weren't overly nationalistic. They weren't red, white, and blue. They were bold shapes, patterns, as I said. And in working with the architect, John Jurde, they created all of these environmental pieces. They created the wayfinding, and he gave her an interesting bit of advice. And I think this is so cool. When they were first starting out,
Let me guess. Did he say never stand up in a canoe?
that, and then the second thing he said was, don't look at this as just you're making signs to tell people what bus to get on. Think about this as the whole. You're doing, dream of this as a whole entire system. And he referred to her design scheme as festive federalism, which I think was pretty fun too.
Okay, Todd, so you really talked about the future state, how the 84 Olympics really set the stage for what was to come. And hey, speaking of the future, I'm thinking about our next round of drinks. How about we take a minute, stroll over to the bar, and wet our whistles for the second half of our walk down memory lane? What do you think?
Hey, sounds good. We'll see everyone back here in just a minute. Hi, while we have your attention, if you want to learn more about us and the podcast, there are a few ways to do it.
Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com. All of that is spelled out. No numbers.
Kind of a long URL, so do yourself a favor and bookmark it. Once you're there, you can find links to more information about the subjects in this episode, our episode archive, and information about both of us.
Wait, we do want people to visit, right?
Well, and look for us on social media. You can find those links on our website as well.
And while we're at it, if you have a friend who you feel will dig on our rambling,
tell him or her what we're up to.
While we can't guarantee that they will remain your friend, we can guarantee that they will listen to at least 30 seconds of whatever episode you send them the link to.
That's being a little shameless.
And speaking of being shameless, it wouldn't be a proper ask if we didn't mention that if you like what you hear, you can also make a donation via our website. We have a Nigerian prince handling all transactions for us.
In fact, he told us to mention that we have stickers to mail to anyone who donates $10 or more. Are we done?
We're done.
We're done. Episode 18 was a total shift in something that we normally talk about, Elliot, wasn't it? We talked about highbrow stuff earlier in the season, like the Olympics, technology, things like that. But episode 18, we really, I think, hit our stride when we were talking about Saturday morning cartoons.
So basically what you're telling me is you feel our wheelhouse is our inner child.
Yeah, why not? I mean, you got to admit, we did talk about a couple great cartoon characters and a couple great cartoon episodes.
Yeah. Well, you talked about a cartoon character. I would argue my characters were actually from fairy tales, and then they were simply updated for the movies, and then, of course, later Saturday morning when I encountered them, right?
Boy, were they updated. Do you remember? I love when you were telling me a little bit about the background of Three Little Bops.
Yes. So the Three Little Bops, for those of you who have never seen this, and if you've never seen it, I genuinely feel bad for you. This is probably, in terms of a 6-minute short or 6.5 minutes or however long it is, I love this. And I think I just love it because it's one of these Warner Brothers one-off cartoons where they just kind of, on a lark, just went out and reinterpreted the Three Little Pigs. So let's give that a listen real quick. Warner Brothers decided, hey, it's the mid-50s. In fact, it was 1957 when this cartoon was released. And why don't we do a modern retelling of the Three Little Pigs?
Oh, so 1957 you said? So
Yes.
Fritz Freeling and Holly Pratt were also at Warner Brothers at the same time.
Ah, yeah. So we'll have to check the credits. Could very well be the
so
same
there's a
folks.
connection there.
Yeah. Well, it could have been this was maybe their taste for jazz that they then took away with them when they started their own thing.
Yeah, very cool.
Basically, as I mentioned, this cartoon is a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have any of the typical Warner Brothers characters. You know, no Porky Pig, no Bugs Bunny, no Daffy Duck, Foghorn Leghorn, none of those guys, okay?
Okay.
Nor does Mel Blanc do any of the voices in this particular episode. So this is like one of a handful of Warner Brothers cartoons, Looney Tunes, where he was not part of it.
Yeah, I mean, what a great premise for a cartoon. And you mentioned it was the one-off. So, you know, I think we relaxed the rules a little bit on Three Little Bops with that animation style. And even the music style and the lyrics themselves, I thought were hilarious.
Oh, gosh, yeah. We don't even need to say any more than that. Let's just jump in and listen to a quick nugget about the lyrics.
All right. Yep.
Yeah, that was a curveball I hung over the plate for Todd, everybody.
Please continue.
So these three clubs were called the House of Straw and the Dewdrop Inn, which was the one made from sticks, and then the House of Bricks that was built in 1776, according to the lyrics. I mean, this was, the tempo in the song is so great. I mean, I love it so much.
Encouraging all our listeners, go to the episode page on our website and take a look at this cartoon clip of Three Little Bops.
Oh yeah, we have it up there for you guys. Absolutely.
It's fantastic on so many levels. And we also have another one, which is a favorite episode of mine by the Pink Panther. And, you know, one of the things that I was talking about from this production company, Three Little Bops gets into that kind of surreal nature of cartoons a lot, but Pink Panther kind of takes it a little bit to an absurd level with the cartoon episode Pink Blueprint. Do you remember that?
I love that episode. Yes, 100%. 100% I remember.
A quality of their work was about sort of going 3 steps beyond reality. So it was, you know, the language of cartoons, and extreme things happened, but it was almost a surreal quality too. And they were just absolutely masters of a modern look and comic timing. They're probably single-handedly responsible for kids like me jumping off of ledges, expecting to hang in the air before, you know, recognizing there was nothing under me, like suspended in air for 5 seconds until I look up at the camera and then fall.
You know what was interesting? It's funny that you were talking about Inspector Clouseau and a voice in the Pink Panther, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was maybe one time where, if I remember correctly, the Pink Panther broke the fourth wall and he spoke to the audience. Was that, am I correct in remembering that? But
you are.
Yeah. So basically the surreal nature of everything, they had to do that because it was all pantomime. There was no dialogue to keep you engaged, right?
Yeah, right. That's one of the factors that I love so much about this character.
So for people who have never seen that episode, and again, as we mentioned a minute ago, this is on our episode page. You can please go watch it. Pink Panther, if I remember correctly, Todd, he wanted this super funky, modern style house, right?
Yeah.
And I really think the backgrounds and the animation stuff, there was a very sort of modern, I'm going to use that word in quotes, right? But there was a very modern sort of knowing sensibility. It was a little bit different I think, than Warner Brothers cartoons. There was definitely the level of humor, but I think it was approached from a different perspective.
Yeah, definitely. It was an homage to mid-century modern, and here's a little bit about that. What I really love about this, you've already mentioned that there was little to no dialogue, so it was all pantomime, which was just rich. And the styling of these cartoons, they were very mod. The backgrounds were really simple, limited line work, limited color, kind of wonky mid-century shapes and perspectives, and, total of the time, right? And even the line work in the backgrounds, which they were just beautiful. The line work was enhanced, super rough, uneven, very textural lines. Like, do you remember the illustrator, Mr. Fotheringham?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of texture. Like
Ink blot.
Yeah. Just beautiful, so of the time. So that combined with the limited dialogue, a heavy use of great sort of swinging jazz music by Henry Mancini really made this character and this series stand out. Episode 19, we kind of came off the lowest of brows with cartoon culture into maybe...
Hey, speak for yourself, pal. I mean, I was delving into literature here.
Yeah, I know. It was thick. It was like takes on Hamlet. You're right. But our episode 19 was about flag design, which was maybe even the highest of brows.
It's up there. Yep.
It's up there because you know what we learned? You were talking about, we both picked two countries. Mm-hmm. I was afraid we were going to pick the same country. Mm-hmm. And you taught me a lot about the country of the canal and its origins of the flag, which I had no idea about.
I just love the design of this flag. Ever since I was little, been into flags, and this was always one that stuck with me whenever I was, looking at a flag book or flipping through an encyclopedia or, whatever those reference books were when we were in school and we would need to go to the library and look something up. That flag always stuck with me. I always really, really liked it. And I'll tell you what, rather than me continuing to ramble, let's listen to a clip of me rambling about the design of the Panamanian flag. You mentioned that, obviously, Panama, the Panama Canal. Mm-hmm. So the flag, you said you might not be totally aware of what it looks like. So I'm gonna describe it for you. So, as you guessed earlier, it is in fact a rectangle. I know that was a mind bender. So it's a typical flag ratio, like a 3-to-2 ratio, horizontal rectangle. This is a quote directly from the Panamanian government in terms of the dictates of the design of their flag. Okay? So, the flag of the Republic consists thus of a divided rectangle of 4 quarters. The upper field, close to the pole, white with a blue star of 5 points. The upper field further from the pole, red, so it's solid red. The lower field near the pole, blue, so it's solid blue. And the lower one further from the pole, white with a red star of 5 points. So, in other words, it's a rectangle divided into 4 smaller rectangles, and then each of those rectangles is either solid red or solid blue, or has a 5-pointed star that's either red or blue. So I think when I was little, I really liked this flag because it reminded me, of course, with the stars and the colors of the American flag. But of course, it's very, very different in terms of its design. And so I think I sort of had this aha moment where it was like taking the same ingredients, but sort of using them in a different way. And so I think that's the reason that I remembered it.
Okay, so good description, but that was not the first flag, right? didn't they have some troubles with the design?
Troubles. Trouble. It was, we'll say the first design that was suggested was troublesome on a number of different levels, I think. So I'll tell you what, we talk a little bit about that. Yeah, let's jump in. I mean, why not? There's, you know what, Todd, in life you sometimes learn by good examples, and there are other times you learn through bad examples. And I would say this is an example of the latter. Let's talk for a minute about the design that was shot down. I think I mentioned to you that the flag that we see today was in fact the second design. Okay, so Philippe Jean Bunau Varilla, maybe that was the correct pronunciation, with apologies to his descendants. He was a French soldier who was influential in the construction of the Panama Canal. So I mentioned the Panama Canal earlier, how then and today it was so important for the country of Panama. So his wife designed the first serious proposal for a Panamanian flag. And let's just say it was a bit on the rough side. So
it's the ultimate of, I kind of like what you did, Elliot, but my wife had some ideas to share too.
Yeah, well, in this case, it was sort of saying to the United States, we like what you did, but we want to put our own flavor on it. So it was based on the flag of the United States, again, possibly due to our country's hand in Panamanian independence, right? So I understand that. So our flag has 13 horizontal stripes. This flag design had 13 horizontal stripes. However, rather than red and white horizontal stripes, they were red and yellow. So this, of course, as I mentioned earlier, was due to the connection to Colombia, because Colombia's, one of their colors is red, and the other one is blue, and then, of course, yellow. And but also, who was Colombia settled by? The Spanish. And what are the country's colors of Spain? That is red and yellow. So red and yellow permeating this design for kind of, it's like Russian nesting dolls inside of something else here.
Right.
Okay, so Bunau Varilla also replaced the stars in the blue canton in the blue field in the United States flag with, and this is crazy, and we'll post an image of this online because even when you read it, you can't quite visualize this, okay? So instead of the stars, the white stars, there were two interconnected yellow suns. Okay, so kind of like Tatooine in Star Wars, there's two suns. And the suns represent North and South America. But they're connected, of course, because Panama connects both of the continents.
Oh, clever.
Well,
so it's like a Venn diagram in a flag.
Sort of. It's really more like a flaming barbell. Because the way these two things, way these two things are connected is kind of with a horizontal yellow stick of butter kind of rod or something. I don't know. So yeah, not like a Venn diagram at all.
Okay, talked about you learn from good examples and bad examples, and we talked about some of the troubles. The flag that I chose was the flag of Switzerland, and if you remember, I was trying to explain the origins of where Swiss red came from, talking about the different cantons. And do you remember how we got into this sort of discussion about, was it pronounced Schwitz? And you finally came to a solution. But let's listen to the clip. How about that, Elliot?
Yeah, we're hooked on phonics over here at Two Designers. Yeah.
Each canton operated independently, yet they were all part of the Kingdom of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. And this is cool. So one of the cantons was called Schwyz, and I'll spell that and then clean off my microphone. But it's SCHWYZ. 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 How would you pronounce that, Elliot?
Schweiss.
Schweiss. Okay.
Perhaps. I mean,
You
again,
have German lineage, so
I am
but
I'm also the person who apologized earlier for not knowing how to pronounce anything.
Schweiz, maybe.
Yeah.
Schweiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should, in spirit of Mel Brooks, we should call it Schwartz.
Schwartz. Yeah.
So, Todd, the Schwartz it is. I think we settled on that. We
Perfect.
probably lost both of our listeners in Switzerland by doing that, but we need to all sacrifice for our art. I think we can agree on that.
We do. And I was trying to talk highbrow policy, Swiss culture, feudal system, federalism, things like that, about flags, and I used the term imperial immediacy, and you got totally distracted thinking that would be a great band name. So in spite of that, here's a little bit about why it was important to have flags that honored the different political leaders. Now, enter a guy named Wilhelm Tell. Does that sound familiar to you, Elliot?
It does.
Yeah. He wrote an overture, shot an apple off his kid's head, blah, blah, blah. He was a Swiss revolutionary battling the cruel treatment by the counts of Habsburg House. And folklore tells us he was the one who encouraged some of the cantons to join together to form the Confederacy of Switzerland. So at the time, there were 3 that joined to form the initial Confederacy. And although the different cantons worked together as one battle unit, they still flew under different symbols. So the Swiss Confederacy, which was referred to now as the Old Swiss Confederacy, won more territorial battles and more cantons joined the Confederacy, and it started to become a problem on the battlefield because they couldn't identify who was friend or who was foe. So they had to find a way to kind of come together because this was causing a great problem and a great divide. So, Elliot, incidentally, this is exactly how ABBA broke up, too. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, it's funny you bring up music because I was thinking Imperial Immediacy would be an amazing name for a metal band. Well, Todd, so I was talking about Central America. You were talking about Europe. Europe's known for a lot of things. I think we can agree on that, right? A lot of influences on American culture.
Clogs?
Well, I mean, outside of your wardrobe.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was thinking more food.
Yeah. Food, yeah. Sauerkraut?
Yeah, and what goes great with sauerkraut?
Sausages!
That's right.
Speaking of sausages and sports mascots.
Yes. They both go great with sauerkraut, I think.
They do.
Okay. So, yes. Sausages, sports mascots. You guys know where we're headed if you're baseball fans. And you live in
around the
Midwest.
bases, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, we're always, Todd, they say it's... they say it's easy to get to first base, but I don't know. Ask 6th grade me
Not
that.
in a sausage suit.
Yeah, you got to pick your battles for sure. But anyway, famous sausages. Yes, so the Milwaukee Brewers and their famous sausages. Probably not the first mascot to pop in your head when you think, oh yeah, baseball team. So let's delve a little bit into to how this was revealed to the fans of the Brewers. Let's forget about those. Let's push Bernie Brewer and Barrelman off to the side because today the group of mascots that we're highlighting are the famous racing sausages.
Say what?
Apparently they're not that famous.
I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah. Well, apparently you've never been to a Brewers game.
So, no, I haven't. And I don't know how... Well, I can see how sausages may have a role in Milwaukee, but I don't know what they would have to do with baseball or anything like that.
Did you just purposely use the word sausage and roll in the same sentence?
I did not, but it really just, it really played out just beautifully.
You're just that magically brilliant. I see.
It's just magically brilliant.
Okay. Yeah. So the big question, right? how do sausages figure into baseball? These are not, I mean, you have hot dogs at the ballpark, right? Kind of loosely, but that's a far stretch from saying, hey, you know what we ought to do? Let's turn this into our mascot, especially when they're not the Milwaukee hot dogs or the Milwaukee sausages, right? So
right.
What happened here?
Elliot, funny thing about that clip, as well as the whole episode 20 about sports mascots, is we said things in that episode that I never thought I would hear, like famous sausages, running the bases, sausages were stolen,
Yes.
and, things like that. I'm like, I never thought we would talk about such things. But, you did have a little journalistic chutzpah there and told us about an incident with, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy that you mentioned. His name was...
his name was Randall Simon. So you're...
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So I assume chutzpah is Yiddish for scoop. Because, what I had was the down and dirty details about, an assault that happened, and it involved us, and it happened in plain view of thousands upon thousands of baseball fans.
An assault from a sausage.
Well, it was
assault.
There's a word there somewhere. A sauce. I can't do it. I can't figure it out. It's like you talking about people having some sort of growth disorder due to spiders or something. It's just I just can't put the words together properly. But at any rate,
why don't we listen to it? Why don't we listen to it and see what comes?
Yeah. Let's turn to the police blotter for a minute. Remember how earlier I mentioned a little bit of legal trouble or, a little bit of a fracas involving the sausages? Okay. So this is known informally as the Randall Simon incident. All right. So let me lay this out for you. And P.S. There will be footage of this on our episode page, so you guys can witness it or relive it if you're in the greater Milwaukee area, a baseball fan, or both. So on July 9th, 2003, Randall Simon, who was then the first baseman of the Pittsburgh Pirates, decided to play a joke while sitting in the dugout between innings, right? So visiting teams would come to Milwaukee, and over time, they all became familiar with the sausage race because this would be run at the bottom of the sixth inning. So this was very well known. So he tapped Mandy Block, who was wearing the Italian sausage costume with a bat, as the sausage, the cluster ran by, the 5 sausages ran by in the race that we mentioned. He just kind of loosely tapped her, and he didn't hit her, the top of the sausage costume because it's much taller than 6 feet, right? But as you can imagine, due to that, the center of gravity is pretty wonky, so it ended up knocking her over. And then she ended up, kind of like bowling pins, she ended up taking out the hot dog, too. So
I just love hearing you say that she ended up taking out the hot dog.
That's right. So then the Polish sausage helped the Italian sausage up, and all the sausages finished the race. So that's teamwork. That's the spirit right there, right? So
man, that's the United Nations right there.
That is in meat product form. Okay, so you're thinking, it's a prank. No harm, no foul, no big deal. Well, Simon was arrested, he was fined, and he was suspended by Major League Baseball for 3 games. He ended up later apologizing. Because this was considered to be assault. So, yeah. So what did Mandy Block want, right? So she was the one who got knocked down, took out her teammates in the race. Like what was the end game here, right?
Uh-huh.
So she asked only that the offending bat, the bat he used, be autographed and given to her. So she wanted the actual bat that knocked her down autographed. So Randall Simon, actually went ahead and did it. So he obliged.
Yeah, so great. That's a great story. And, Randall Simon, give the guy a pat on the back, trying to make things right.
I think he got into trouble giving someone else a pat on the back, Todd.
Sausage assault.
Yeah, see, that's the phrase I was trying to figure out
Dun,
earlier.
dun.
Yeah. Law and Order.
Sausage assault.
Milwaukee. Law and Order Milwaukee.
Yeah. So he sounds like an awfully colorful character. And Speaking of other colorful characters, my sports mascot was from Syracuse University. And everybody knows the current mascot for Syracuse, right, Elliot?
Yeah, the orange.
Oh, yeah. The orange, right. But I don't know if you recall, like I got into a little bit of the origin of how Syracuse, the town, the university came to be. Mm-hmm. And I was adding it all up like a calculus formula that led to the most logical of mascots being a bird, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it stands to reason. Yeah.
Yeah, and that didn't last very long until they chose another one. Anyway, I'll let me explain it to the listeners here in this clip. So the university began in 1870, and they're widely known now as Syracuse Orange, right? But unfortunately, in the early days, their school colors were pea green and rose pink, which sounds like if you've eaten bad soup, something that might come back to visit you. So those colors, thankfully, didn't last long. They were quickly changed, and in 1890, the colors and the mascot theme was chosen to be orange to represent the Dutch House of Orange, which were also major settlers of the upstate New York area. So now they're called Syracuse Orange in honor of the Dutch House of Orange. And so they thought after that, well, we need a mascot to go with this. So, Elliot, question for you.
Sure.
With a nickname like Syracuse Orange and a city founded through the generosity of the Onondaga Native Americans, what would be a great mascot? You're right. Orioles. Obviously, Orioles.
That would be great, actually.
That lasted a bit, and then they changed to the Syracuse Hilltoppers.
Okay.
And that was a little of, like, none of that was really ringing true.
Yeah, that was an interesting story. So, so they settle on the Saltine Warrior. Okay.
Yeah. How good is that?
Yeah. Interesting. Certainly not what we have today. But what was? Right? I'm trying to remember now. What was the name of the salt? Like, this was a real person, right?
Yes. Okay. I knew you were going to test me on this. Yeah. All right. Let me just take a second here. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
You ready for it? Okay. The Saltine Warrior, whose remains they found on campus, his name was Hoshinaga Okigeta. Yeah, that was it.
So it was a Japanese guy?
Hoshinaga Okigeta. No, he was a Onondaga chief.
Oh, I thought it was the guy who started Bitcoin.
No.
Different Japanese guy.
Hoshinaga. No, wait a minute, that's not right. You got me confused now. Oh, anyway, it turns out there was more to the story. Do you want to hear a little bit about that?
You're here, I'm here, let's go for it.
So where I last left you in talking about Syracuse Orange, do you remember the story I told you about finding the remains of the great chief Okigeta Hoshinaga on campus as they were digging up a women's gymnasium?
I remember that vaguely. Actually, once we started talking about saltines, I left for a few minutes to go get a snack.
Well, and just as a reminder, the great chief, his name translated to Saltine Warrior.
Oh, yes. Now I remember.
And so that captivated the imagination of students, alumni, faculty. Finally, we've got this really historical tie-in to our university on the campus of our university, and we can honor the Onondaga tribe, Native Americans that helped us found Syracuse. There was just one tiny little problem with that.
All right, what is it?
That whole story was a hoax. It was completely made up.
Really?
Yes, and however, that didn't stop them from being known as the Saltine Warriors for almost 50 years, from 1931 to 1978. They were still known as the Saltine Warriors.
Wait, when was this?
Even after they found it was a hoax.
When was it discovered that this was a hoax?
It was in the 50s, the 1950s.
And so for another...
So about halfway through the 47-year run.
Yeah, for another 2 decades, they just said, well, let's just ride this wave into the shore anyway.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. They're like, hey, it's too popular. Everybody loves the Saltine Warrior. That was fun.
Well, Todd, I think we welcomed a lot of people to the bar over our second season, and this is only the first half. So this was, folks, this is part one. And if you want more, well, the good news is we're going to have part two. We're going to cover A, Todd getting me more drinks. B, the second half of all the topics we covered, and then C, Todd getting me more drinks. So I really feel that you should stick around for that for our next episode.
I think this is a great place to end the episode then.
Before you go broke?
That's right, exactly.
All right, guys, we'll see you again soon.